Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. So today we're going to focus on leadership, structuring leadership, developing leadership. The third of the major practices in our leadership framework. And also we're going to check in on public narrative. And when we introduced public narrative at the beginning about self, us, now, we focused on the self part. We're going to take a look at the us part as sort of emerging as you begin to form a team and so forth together. We'll have some more to put this in context, but just a few announcements. First, on your reflection papers, if you could put your organizing sentence at the top of the page, it'll really help us be clear and help us focus and read them better. Let's see, this week we're posting Raheli Davies, Julian Hill, Eric Leslie, and Lori O's papers as examples of reflection papers from this week. So take a look at those. They're different. In terms of the papers, the strong papers, as you'll see, focus on specifics. A specific one-on-one meeting in this case, or a couple of them, but they unpack very specific concrete realities. That's sort of what the focus of these papers is intended to be, not be a theoretical reflection on theories of things. It's about focus on practice. So they have that. They were conceptually clear about like what a one-on-one meeting is, what it isn't, what its purpose is in terms of establishing relationship, creating a ground for future engagement, and so forth. There was self-awareness. In other words, the person was present in the paper and conscious of their own challenges, of their own concerns, their own successes, and so forth. In other words, they were monitoring their own use of the tool or the practice and reflecting on it. So, a very strong reflection paper doesn't mean it's all like, I had a fantastic one-on-one meeting. It may be that I've really been struggling, but it's an open acknowledgement, reflection, discussion of that indicates awareness and understanding of the concepts and of one's own learning process. That's the idea. And then we can engage. We can well on those. I also want to emphasize. We're going to have the content here in a minute, but in terms of the supplementary readings, there's a couple things there that could be very, very useful for you. One is a piece on team coaching, which takes the coaching work we began and takes it down a whole other level. We didn't put it in the required readings, but for folks that want to really dig into how coaching can be applied to develop teams and leadership, it's very useful. And the other is a short video on the Orpheus Chamber Orchestra, which is an orchestra that got rid of its conductor and organized itself through leadership teams. And we'll say more a little bit about that a little later. It's an interesting contrast of Zubin Mehta and Orpheus Chamber Orchestra and sort of how to make beautiful music collaboratively. So we can talk more about that. But those are just some general. Do we have? Let's see. Oh, Inbal, you have on the workshop.
Yeah. So Wednesday, this Wednesday, 8 p.m. to 9:30, we have our team building launching workshop. It's unlike Study the Syllabus. It's at night. It's in the room where we had the Action Skills Saturday workshop. So Tauman 9AB, you get access to it only with the elevators up to the 5th floor.
Just to be clear, the focus of this workshop is launching a leadership team. So what this workshop is intended to do is to equip you with the tools you need to launch a leadership team. Now, not everybody's ready to do that tomorrow, but it will help you have an idea what that looks like. And what it looks like to create the structural foundation for the work that you're going to do later on in terms of leadership and organization, how it's all going to work. And it's probably, I think, of all the workshops, probably the most concrete and practical in terms of the frameworks and the techniques, the pieces. Unless, I don't know, everybody here have great experiences with meetings? Meetings are always terrific, right? Pretty awful, most of them. And no, it's reality. I mean, they're pretty terrible, and we struggle through them because we sort of have to endure it, which is deeply counterproductive if we're trying to organize and mobilize collective action. And so what this workshop focuses on is actually how to make stuff happen in a meeting in a constructive way, and particularly launching a leadership team. So that's the focus then. Any other announcements?
Hey guys, I'm Kevin. So part of the beauty of this course is that everyone's got such a great story and so interesting, and we really like to get to know each other a bit better. So a few of us thought it would be quite nice to go to Park after the workshop tomorrow, which is just as far down the road. We'll be going there right from the workshop, so follow us if you guys would like to come. Great?
And attendance will not be taken. No. Right? No, it's good. Okay, I think we're ready to go then. So, again, to contextualize where we are, we're operating in this framework of leadership as accepting responsibility. It's funny, these words may have more and more meaning as time goes on. Accepting responsibility, yeah, really, for enabling others. Now that turns out to have quite a bit of substance to it. To achieve shared purpose, that's especially going to be the focus this week, under conditions of uncertainty. And organizing as being built from identifying, developing, and recruiting leadership and building community around leadership and building power from the resources of that community or constituency. So leadership development is central to the whole practice, to all the practices that we're going to be doing. And I asked you to take a look at a piece on leadership that's been around for a while, about 3,000 years old. It's a selection from Exodus 18. Why start with that? Why start with that? What's the point of that story? Yeah, Andrew.
Seems like Jethro's telling him, you can't do it all yourself. You get burned out. You got to work with other people, otherwise you're not going to be effective.
Yeah. Does that seem like a relevant piece of information? I mean, okay, so here's the text. It's been around for quite a while. What's the central issue there that Moses is struggling with? What's the central issue? He's a dot. He's a dot. And this is, I think that there's probably any one single challenge that is the greatest probably in organizing, and in this class in particular. It's finding a way to get out of the dot. How to take yourself out of that place of a dot and move beyond it to where you can actually enable others to join you in the work of leadership and building organization. Because I think I was saying last night that for me the breakthrough happened in organizing when I realized I wasn't supposed to organize 10,000 people, that I was supposed to find people who were going to do that. What I had to do was find those people and work with them and cultivate them and enable them and strengthen them, and that's how this work would get done. So what was the suggestion made to Moses? Yeah.
Well, Jethro told him that make all the big decisions yourself and all the small judgments, empower them so they can do it on their own.
Well, but now Jethro has some very specific advice to him. There's a sequence, an order to it. Anybody notice what the first thing? So Jethro sees Moses, right? And the people are literally towering over him, is the way it's described. He's sitting on the ground and people are towering over him. And Jethro, says, well, this is no good. Problem for you, problem for the people. Right? Going to burn both you and the people out. Then what's his first word of his first advice? You notice what the first thing he said was? Anybody? Anybody got the text? You take a look. Yeah.
Find men with certain characteristics.
Second thing. That's good. But what's the first thing? It's very interesting what the first thing is, actually. Anybody see? The first thing, it's he says Moses is the only guy that knows the law. And the first thing he says to Moses, you can't be the only one that has all the information. You gotta educate the people. You gotta share information. Pretty interesting. Very first thing he says, you can't be the one who's got all the info. because then that's control. And so if you want to engage, if you want to get it off of you and out there, first thing you got to share information, which is a pretty modern piece of advice, actually. Then the second piece is what you were saying, which was what?
Find men capable with leadership qualities.
Now, what were those qualities? Do you remember?
Respected.
Yeah.
That will do good.
Yeah.
And people look up to them.
Yeah. Anything else he pointed to, particularly in characteristics? I don't think he mentioned Kennedy School degrees, but but what? Yeah.
God fear.
Yeah, and what else? Honest, not taking bribes. I mean, it's interesting. He sort of says, look for people of good character, that are of respect in their communities. I mean, he's sort of describing people who have a certain kind of character strength that he's looking for. And then the third thing he says is what? What's the third piece of advice? Because there's a third piece. Not enough to find these people. What do you got to do then? Yeah. Well, so what's he asking him to say for 1 out of every 10 do what? To do what? Well, and to decide cases. He actually is saying 1 out of every 10, I mean, we can read it men, it was men, we can read it people, we'd like to read it with a more modern framework. But he's saying 1 out of every 10 people, give them authority. Don't hold on to all the authority. He's saying, don't hold on to the information. Find people of good character and give them authority. Now, 1 over the other 9, and then out of those 10 another, and out of those 10 another, and then the most important cases come to you. Now, you can think of that. Is that a structure for command and control? Is it just the opposite? It's a way of empowering 10% of the community with some real authority. Pretty interesting. So he's really coming up with a way to take what Moses has been holding so tightly and delegate. We would call it distributed leadership today. Now, it's kind of interesting. I mean, this is like probably Jethro's got to be the first management consultant in history. It's pretty wise. So now the question is, how does Jethro get away with it? Why does Moses buy it in the first place? What's the connection? Because there's a first half in this chapter that actually is related, I think, to the second half, which we've just been talking about. What happens in the first half? What's Jethro doing there? Who is he to Moses?
Father-in-law.
Father-in-law, all right. So he's got some relationship, right? He's not just dropping out of the sky and saying, do this. There's some relationship there. And when he shows up with Moses' wife and with his 2 kids, right? That's as if to say sort of wife here, kids, a little work-life balance here. Moses, I don't know, but, and the first thing, so he asked Moses, how's it going? Anybody remember how Moses describes how it's going? Happily? Things are great? It's been really tough. It's really, really hard. What's Jethro's response? He says, oh, I see the Lord has really blessed you. There's this little reframing going on there. And then, remember, you got this wife and this kid. And then that whole first half of the chapter is about the family sort of reconnecting and celebrating that. You think there's a connection between the first half and the second half of the chapter? You're nodding your head. What do you think it might be?
Jethro is reminding Moses of his values in his family that he's kind of forgotten in light of his other values of taking this leadership. And so he's then motivated to kind of advance them.
Yeah, I think it's really important, this connection, because I think otherwise it's a little hard to explain how Moses just suddenly does it. Like what? How can he's been operating this one way. What's he suddenly doing? It's as if Jethro reminds him, wait a second, you are not all your work. You can let go a little bit. You're still a husband, a father, a child of God. You can let go a little bit. Your whole worth is not wrapped up in this project, which sounds a little weird to say, given the whole context. But yeah, it is. I mean, yeah. But it is, because unless he can find a way to enable Moses to let go, Come on now, how many of us have been in a situation where, by God, I'm the only thing that stands between utter disaster and this thing that I care about. And if I'm, the whole thing collapses. And is it true? Sometimes it is true. But if it is true, then we got a problem, a real problem, because it's a very fragile way to build anything. So I want to start with this reading because it nails what is a core issue. And like I say, not an issue that just came up yesterday. It has to do with something about the way we are as people, human beings, and the way in which we allow ourselves to fall into these positions where we think that the whole world revolves around us, and we find ourselves unable to let other people in. Why do you think that is? Why do you think that is? Why do you think that happens? Why do you think it's so hard to say, I need help? Any thoughts on that? Or maybe nobody in this class has that issue. I don't know. Yeah.
I think it can be completely weak to know how to admit that struggling with my
So it'll look like I sort of think, so I need to show I'm in control by putting myself in a position in which I can't possibly be in control, right? No, but I mean, I think you're right. There's some idea, this illusion of control. The illusion of control. And if I ask for help, well then, gee, the whole world's going to know it. Oh my God. Yeah.
It's also like, in Moses' case, I can see it can reinforce self-doubt, where you're like, literally God told me to do this, and I can't do this. Right. And
Yeah.
that's the fear, is that, oh, if I'm managing this, then I'm the one that can do it.
Yeah.
But once that self-doubt creeps in,
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. See, I think that, I think you're right. I think that the more we feel like we need to assert control is a reflection of the more insecure we feel. I mean, because it's like that's our way of trying to deal with that insecurity. Rather than inviting people in to help us, we've got to, by God, we're going to, you can have a national security policy like that, by the way. George Bush tried stuff. That's another topic. But I mean, no, this whole idea that you can somehow substitute control for interdependence and get there that way is problematic. And I think it's something we really struggle with. Yeah.
I think beyond the control, there's also an element of real identification with the work. So you are who you are because you do the work that you do.
Yeah.
And if that work can or should be distributed, then what does that leave you with as an identity? I think that's
Boy, that resonates. Yeah. Which goes to the first half of this chapter and the importance of relationships outside the work. Remember, we're talking about public and private relationships and sort of understanding sort of the dynamic there. What else? Yeah.
I think when you're asking someone to kind of go on this journey with you that has so many unknowns and it could be exposed to like hard things or dangerous things, like I think a lot of responsibility for not wanting to expose what the negative aspects of what
Yeah.
might come, and I think that's sort of like being protective of that person.
It's interesting. But are you being protective of that person, or are you really being protective of yourself?
I think in part because like I don't want to disappoint them.
Yeah.
And I don't want to, but I think I am in some ways like protective of them because I don't want like I feel like I can handle this, but
Yeah.
like
I don't want to.
I don't want to distribute that.
So how would you think about that? And can you think about that in a different way? I mean, I guess if you could force people to, right? But what if they are free to choose?
I mean, like I respect everybody as like their own person, like when you're setting expectations, like this isn't going to be easy. This is going to be kind of this, this might have a real hard repercussion.
Yeah.
Here are the risks that they're at least making an informed choice, but I still feel like a real responsibility.
Yeah. Well, responsibility is one thing, but it's also a question of recognizing the responsibility other people can accept or not. I think being clear about what the risks are is really great and important. I think it's very important because then a person can make a real choice. But I think it's a question to think about: do I need to protect them from making choices that they can make in their own interest? Because after all, going back to one-on-ones and relationships and interests, if it isn't in their interest, then what are they doing it? I mean, that, there's a reciprocity and mutuality here involved. If it's all about doing you a favor, then that's not organizing anymore. That's, I don't know, that's friends and favors and family and something else. It's not organizing. It's not about people doing you favors. Leadership, organizing, is about challenging people to step up to responsibilities that they could accept consistent with their values and what they want. And so it's about creating opportunities. It's not about getting people to do you favors. And that favor mentality will really trip you up. Really, really trip you up. Because there's no strength in that. And then it's all about you. It's not about them. It's not about what's in it for them. And then they can't then interpret it to other people. Say, oh, I did so-and-so a favor. That's why I'm doing this. That's a different political patronage, another kind of operation. I don't know. I want to service this because everybody's got to struggle with this in order to get beyond being the dot. Now, one of the ways we get beyond being the dot is to create structures. And structure is one of those words that sometimes, structure, and everybody wants to run the other direction. It's like, certainly for my generation, it was true. Structure was sort of, oh, that's oppression, and that's constraint, and that's really bad, and we want to be free of structure. So Joe Freeman, a feminist sociologist, wrote this piece in the 70s, Tyranny of Structuralism. What did you take from her piece? What did you take from her reflection on this question? Yeah, Rebecca?
I thought it was really interesting because it took a really hard look at what I think a lot of people think is just kind of an innocuous thing. Like, well, we don't have a structure, but not seeing what she called kind of that, like, unspoken the power that is there, but just isn't being acknowledged, and how that's most doubly worse than an acknowledged, like, bad power.
Yeah. Does that resonate with people? That kind of experience? Oh, no, we don't have a structure, we're all free here. Well, except something got decided. Well, wait a second, who decided it? Well, where was that? Well, where was I? Well, you know what I'm talking about. And her point, exactly, we're human beings. We're going to create structures. They're going to be on the books or off the books. Choose. Now, if you put them on the books, they can be transparent, and we can be accountable. If they're off the books, they're not transparent. They're hidden. So it's a question of understanding the ways in which structure creates space. The way in which structure actually creates freedom doesn't constrain it because it creates space within which it can be exercised. There's a Isaiah Berlin, the British philosopher, sort of makes a distinction between what he calls negative freedom and positive freedom. And negative freedom is sort of like being freedom from something being held over you. But positive freedom is also about creating ways in which you are able to, in fact, exercise choice and agency, of which this kind of structure question would fall into that domain. Creating structures through which we can choose, make choices, make decisions, and operate. And so there's a connection then between designing structure and developing leadership and exercising leadership in a way that can get beyond the dot and that can get to another direction. And that's this leadership team approach. And I want to say a little about it because this is an issue that people struggle with for a long, long time. I mean, this whole question of how to structure leadership, how to sustain accountability, how to keep from being the dot, the whole sort of thing. And a colleague here, one of my dissertation advisors, Richard Hackman, passed away a few months ago over in social psychology here, was really kind of the guru on teams. Did a lot of really great research on teams and how they work. And I don't know if have I mentioned this work before? Because Hackman, he started out studying cabin crews in airplanes and listening to lots of black box recordings. What went wrong? Why was there miscommunication? And so many of those airplane accidents were due to miscommunication among the cabin crew. I was trying to understand what were the dynamics here. Why does this happen? What's happening here? And then he got interested in symphony orchestras because he discovered that the highest level of job dissatisfaction, one of the highest levels of job dissatisfaction around was concert musicians. Seems a little strange. Why? 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 why would a concert musician be dissatisfied with their job? Yeah, all right. Wait, somebody we haven't heard from. Yeah.
Because they had to follow the conductor and they couldn't really express their creative.
Yeah. So you take somebody who's got a gift, they work hard to develop it, they got a lot of creative ideas and talent, and guess what? They're a cog in somebody's machine. Real dissonance there, real problem there. And out of that work came the research on the Orpheus Chamber Orchestra, which I mentioned in the video, which was an orchestra of young musicians came out of Juilliard, decided they didn't want to have a conductor, but they wanted to make beautiful music, and so they created a system of leadership teams. They had leadership, it was structured, but they didn't have a conductor. So if you watch the video, it's a nice little clip of exactly how they worked to do that. Well, that work on teams and leadership then informed the work in a project I was doing with Sierra Club, where we began to figure out how to develop these leadership teams in an organizing context. And then that was the foundation we brought to the Obama campaign in 2007, when we began building the volunteer foundation on the basis of teams, not on the basis of the old formula of one individual leader trying to lead everything and then burning out or else burning everybody else out, which is the pattern. And so that's a structure. Sure, there's many other structures, but that's one way to think about how to build in an interdependent understanding of leadership from the get-go and avoid that dot business that then can be built on. And it's based on a few pretty simple claims. That when a team functions well, when it's a well-functioning team, and this is true of any kind of team. I mean, who's been on teams? Yeah, so everybody's got experience with this, and you know, a lot of it's in athletics often. Three things will happen. You'll get the job done. You'll win, or you'll produce whatever it is, or you know. But second, if it's a well-functioning team, your capacity will grow. You'll get better. You'll grow in your capacity to work together and to connect with each other and to learn as a unit, not just as individuals, kind of how to harmonize what you're doing. And the individuals who are part of the team will experience growth and development themselves as well. Sound familiar? Organizing outcomes, change out there, build capacity of the community, develop leadership. So it's sort of a triple thing. Now, this is fairly predictable if you create certain conditions, and these are the conditions over here. First, a team needs to be bounded. Bounded, meaning it's clear who's on and who isn't. Not exclusionary, but clear who is on this team and who isn't. They do a team diagnostic survey, Richard and his colleagues, with organizations, and they'll ask people to describe who's on their team. And you know, it's amazing how many different accounts you'll get. Oh, it's these people, this, that. Now, just think about a basketball game that operated that way, or a soccer game, or any kind of, or a string quartet. Well, I don't know, today we just have 3 players. I don't know, 5 may show up tomorrow. Well, it's ridiculous, right? But when it comes to organizing our own activity, oh, that's fine. Yeah, well, whoever shows up is great. Oh, you didn't show up the last 3 meetings? Terrific. See, the point is here about being explicit about who's holding responsibility and who isn't. And being very clear about it. So bounded. And that goes to the second one, which is stability. Am I the only person that's sometimes gotten pretty irritated at the amount of time you spend in a meeting explaining to the people that didn't show up last time what happened? And so then half the time is gone there, and then we don't have any time to really plan what we're going to do, knowing that half those people are not going to show up the next time. Talk about a waste of time and disrespect. I mean, it's really, really disrespectful at a really deep level for all the people, for the few people that do show up consistently. So stability, boundedness, diversity. That the team actually reflect the skills or the experience or the understanding that the team will need to be successful. And that's going to vary in different circumstances. So, create these conditions, you're more likely to get these outcomes, but then there are certain decisions you have to make. to turn these conditions into these outcomes. And the first one is you have to do the work of arriving at a shared purpose. Arriving at a shared purpose. You know, the thing that will most frustrate collective effort is confusion about the purpose. Now, what we discovered in the Sierra Club and the Obama experience was that by having one-on-one meetings and by having lots of story work ahead of time, people had a pretty good sense about interests and values and who they were. So you weren't just starting blank. You weren't just starting from nowhere in terms of doing this work of let's arrive at a shared purpose. And then along the way, we developed a little exercise for doing it. We use it in workshops all over the place, which we're going to introduce at the workshop, and as well, which is in the notes, which is, it's a way of facilitating a group getting to focusing on what it has, what it shares, as opposed to what differentiates it at the beginning. There's a simple little exercise. I'll describe it, but it's sort of like, let's say there's 5 people or 6 people in a team, and so you ask each person to write a sentence. What do you imagine our goal to be? With who? Who's our constituency? Doing what kinds of activities? And you go around. And then everybody reads their sentence, and the organizer, the facilitator, just does keywords under goal, keywords under who, keywords under activities. And you look at it, you see what you got. You do some synthesizing, and you do some differentiating. And then you do a second round. And you do the same thing. And each time you're focusing on differentiating and then discussing where the differentiation is. Usually it takes about 3 rounds. Why might that work? It sounds very simple. Why do you think it might work? Yeah.
Quite often in teams, it's not until weeks or months or maybe even years into a project that people sort of think, oh, I'm not doing it for that, or I don't really want to do it with them. And you can assume a lot about that everyone else in the room is there for the same reason as you and has the same idea as you, unless you explicitly discuss that at the start, it will start to rip you apart later on.
So one thing is making it explicit really helps. Why else do you think the exercise I described? I mean, I'm sure you've been in meetings where you've got to decide what your purpose is. You get into a big debate about it. Why might this process I suggest actually work differently? Any thoughts? I see an idea forming over there. Yeah.
It helps people to look at what their own priorities are.
Yeah.
So if I'm with myself, I know what my priorities are. But when you put it in perspective of what others think, it helps you actually come up with new priorities.
Okay, that's good. There's an articulation there that's required. Nada?
I think it can also help avoid kind of interpersonal conflict later on, because if you don't have this explicit time where everyone can be heard about what vision they share, and later on if you come to realize that 2 different people have very conflicting visions, it can become very personal.
All right, so it gets it out front. There was some more. Yeah, back there.
I was going to say something.
Same thing. Yeah.
And I would say it can sort of help to separate sort of the what and the how.
Yeah.
So if you start arguing sort of like, oh, I want to do this or I want to do that, but if you can try and figure out like what underlying factors or what underlying conditions you're trying to address, it can help to like reduce some of the higher level.
Yeah, and I think you're on a good track there. Yeah.
I think, I mean, very similar, but just that many minds are better than one, and so people might have ideas of the how that others didn't, and so you just get really, really specific around shared purpose much faster than you would if you didn't have a discussion.
Yeah, I think all these are all interesting factors. I think there's another factor. Yeah. Right.
It seems like it would eliminate some of the social coercion that's present if you didn't do the writing part of the exercise.
Yeah.
If you just put it out there, you know, the natural leader is going to come up and say, "Oh, we should do this," and everyone.
All right, so you get everybody's voice. That's a very good point. That certainly helps. Yeah.
And when
Allison?
you have everyone's voice, then people have ownership over this together. I mean,
Okay.
we created this.
Oh, so a lot of good reasons here. Yeah, Roman?
I have a question instead of a comment.
Well, wait, let's stay with this, and then we'll go to a question. Yeah.
Highlights what you have in common.
Yeah, see, I think I think all these factors are relevant. I think this is a key factor, because usually when we start to talk about what's our purpose going to be, somebody will say, well, I think it should be this. And then somebody else is very likely to say, well, no, I think it ought to be that. And right away, the whole discussion is defined by where we disagree rather than where we agree. And I think what this exercise does is bring out the commonality as a ground within which to debate the differences. So it doesn't obscure the differences, but it makes us really conscious of the commonalities. And I think that when we're trying, as a formal leadership team, if we're presuming some shared values and interests, otherwise we wouldn't be in the room trying to form a leadership team, I think that's one reason this may help move things in that direction. So it's, I'm sure there's other ways to do this, but the point is, it is a piece of work that needs to be done right in the beginning of a leadership team. So there's real clarity about, as a team, what is it we're trying to do. And let me just mention two other things. I'll go to your question, Roman. The second is shared norms. And we talked a bit about norms, but there's ground rules. It's sort of like a constitution-making moment. There's certain ground rules that seem to be essential. One is, how are we going to handle time? Another one, how are we going to handle commitments? What if we make a commitment and we don't keep it? How are we going to handle this stuff? Let's talk about it. Let's have a process. And third is, how are we going to make decisions? What's our decision making? Because if you wait to decide how you're going to make decisions until you're in the middle of a big argument, what happens? See, it all gets mixed up. The substance of the argument, the disagreement, interferes with the method, right? And so then it's very hard to reach agreement under those circumstances. So ahead of time, you figure out, okay, we're going to consent in this group, or we're going to vote in this group, or we're going to, whenever we can't decide, we're going to give Andrew the authority to decide, or whatever. But the point is having a process to make decisions. That's number two, the norms. And finally, is doing the work of matching the work of the team with the people. And that's clear roles. And again, to avoid popularity contests, it's like, well, what kind of roles do we need here? Well, we need a data manager. We need, 3 volunteer outreach people. We need an organization person. We need whatever it might be. Well, what would be some of the characteristics? Somebody, let's see, for our financial person, we want somebody that's lousy at math? No, good, okay. It's very rational. Then going around looking, okay, now let's take a little inventory. What are your strengths? What are your challenges? You do some matching. That sounds weirdly rational. But actually, it's another one of those processes that can sort of depersonalize, take it out of this whole favorite business stuff, and put it on the table and give us a way to deal with it. And, you then designate roles, people. One of the roles is probably team coordinator. Which is different than being a boss. Coordinating a leadership team is a leadership act itself. It's a work of coordinating other people who share leadership responsibility for different aspects of the program. So in the initial Obama teams, we always had a data manager, we had a financial, fundraising person, we had volunteer recruiters, we had organizational liaisons, we had a team coordinator. And the cool thing was then that every team had a data person, and so they could all coordinate with each other across teams. We'd get new information out to the data coordinators and all the teams very efficiently and quickly because the structure was transparent and see how it worked. So look, like any of these things, it's one thing to talk about it, it's another thing to do it in practice. But compared to the other approaches that I've had experience with, this one has a pretty good shot. Because from the get-go, people share responsibility and get that leadership isn't about doing it all yourself. It's about acting in an interdependent way with other people. And so the odds of sustainability, success, and motivation and accountability seem to go way up. And of course, this can then be built on the snowflake over here, then can build outward as people develop their own teams. And I'm in this area, I'm on your team for the whole district, now I'm going to form a team for my sub-district or my neighborhood. Then I'm going to have people form teams, and that way you can keep from being a dot team, which can be just as big a problem as being a dot person. Where people get together and they form the leadership team, and they don't talk to anybody else but each other. And they forget the word leadership, falls out. Leadership means, ooh, there's other people out there that I'm supposed to be relating to. So thinking about how to expand. Okay, Roman, you had a question.
Yes, so these activities assume that you have an authority figure. So there's a group, the people that are trying to be organized, and there's somebody sort of sways a little power in order to kind of say we're going to do a shared purpose now, shared norms. Is it correct? Or
It assumes that the group is willing to accept a process. And whether that's because a bunch of people have learned it and agree, or whether the organizer, you know, in context of organizing, very often the organizer is the source of the information about how to organize. And so people in local communities know a whole lot about the issues in those local communities, but often they don't know that much about organizing. They may know the realities of the community. That's what you're doing there. You're the organizer. So you're supposed to bring something of value. So you say, here's a way we can proceed. You can't force them, and they'll accept it or they won't. But it's having an approach to propose, this is how we could do it. Now, they may run you out of town. Maybe not. But your authority is very conditional. That's the point I'm making.
I shouldn't have said authority figure. I said that a person with an informal authority, a person who's sort of like speaking and people are listening to them. So the reason I'm asking is because I've been in a couple of situations where there was like a room of equals.
Yeah.
That informal authority figure could not emerge. So
Yeah.
it was basically like this chaos and just.
How did you resolve it?
I didn't. Just continue on going, and then I stopped participating in it because I had to come back here.
Yeah, well, that's usually what happens. No, it's usually exactly.
But I was bounded by time meeting, and this was in Ukraine when all these civil society groups were coming together trying to form a common
So
agenda.
what could you do about that?
Well, all I was doing was just observing and trying to figure
No,
out.
but now that you've had this great organizing class, no. I mean, what is a way of dealing with it?
I'm trying to understand it myself right now. And then
Anybody have thoughts, where you're sitting there with a bunch of people and you're going through, what you're describing is really familiar. And sort of there's a need to somehow break out of it. Anybody have thoughts on that? Yeah, over here.
I mean, could you ask the group if they want to designate a facilitator? And it doesn't have to be you necessarily, so it's not seen as like a power grab, but everyone acknowledges that it would be better for the group dynamic if one person managed the discussion.
One possibility, yeah?
Yeah, to build on that, I mean, I very much struggle with the same thing that Rowan is talking about. You can have like a rotating system where people have take responsibilities over time, but I think that does also run into problems when externally people want to turn to one person as the point person to talk to about an issue, and then you get into kind of discussions like, should we have 2 people or 3 people, and then you're just creating more bureaucracy. So I haven't resolved it myself either.
Well, see, part of this though, we have these really confused, these ideas about authority and leadership and coordination and who's the spokesperson and all this stuff. And there's another piece that we assigned by Dr. Well, I think it's not required. It's in the reading. The Drum Major Instinct by Dr. King. This is a great piece. Dr. King's sermon, he was given about a year before he was assassinated. It's his own reflection on the struggles of leadership and this need for recognition and how to manage it and how to deal with it. Because that's partly what's going on there. People are, struggling for, I want to be in the, or he's going to, you get into this competitive stuff. That stuff is so deadly that I don't think there's any easy answer. I think that it's important to try to surface what's going on and try to name it and try to be as transparent as you can be and present it as a choice. Look, we can continue in this deal or else we can do it differently. If we continue, I'm leaving. I don't waste my time. I don't know about other people. But, at some point, people have to make a choice about whether they're going to get serious, decide on structures and processes, or whether they're going to keep contesting this question of who's going to be the first chicken or whatever, however you want to describe it. And yeah, it's human nature, but we also can get beyond it, I think. Yeah.
When people are on the same level, I find it easier to display some type of vulnerability and say, I don't feel this confident about this, so I think I can do it this way. I know you're excellent at this.
Very good. It's very good. I mean, and it's also being transparent about, yeah, we got to do this together. We need each other to do this. And I see you. You're pretty good at that. But the rotation thing, I think, is really tricky because you may wind up rotating financial responsibility when it gets to the person that can't count, and you got some real problems. No, the point is people have different strengths, and you want to craft tasks to strengths so that each person can excel. That's how you get the growth, the individual growth, as well as the collective effort. Yeah, here.
Question also, so when you're thinking about this hierarchy, how do you stop perpetuation of so social biases from invading into your organization. So something I care a lot about is gender equity, and how do you kind of intentionally use your hierarchy to interrupt that and empower people who may not be externally recognized to have the counting skills or whatever to, I don't know, how do you think about that?
Well, just a couple of these. One is structure and hierarchy aren't exactly the same thing, okay? There's a lot of ways to structure things. This is actually a collaborative structure, right? And hierarchy is one of those words like patriarchy, like you know, capitalist exploitation. No, I mean, it's one of those words that is loaded with all kinds of stuff. And so be clear about what you're actually trying to describe. So you're trying to describe how do you create a structure that that is free of all that stuff. How do you? I mean, I imagine you have to name it. I imagine you have to agree on it. I imagine you have to hold yourselves accountable to it. But, you know, you have to take responsibility, exercise agency over those things, I think. And that's part of what the exercise is all about. Yeah, Erin, did you have something? Oh, there was somebody, yeah.
I was just going to say to the point about like rotating financial or other things where you're trying to really get people involved based on their strengths. I think the one place where I've seen that fall through is where people assume that leadership itself is a strength or a characteristic rather than a practice, which I think based on the readings we can challenge that. But I think that's the kind of thing that you want to rotate around, because the point is that anybody can do it. Whereas if you have a specialized set of financial skills, yeah, maybe you'll need the treasurer.
But people are going to be different in different practices. It's going to be some great storytellers. It's going to be great strategists. Somebody else is going to be good at coordinating. Look, I've been in groups where some of us are awful at coordinating things. I don't want that person to have their turn at coordinating. They're just going to screw us up, you know, in the name of equality. No, I want to have a good coordinator there because all our work matters. You know what So again, it's trying to decouple these things from this loaded meaning they've been loaded up with, and then we carry that burden around, and it inhibits us from operating, I think, in a clear and effective way, if we just clear it up. Let's get one, and then we have a few more things here we have to cover. And, you know, we can continue to talk about this workshop in class and so forth. So let's get Michelle and then over here. Yeah.
Also, another question. Can you speak a little bit to how to work with groups that you may, or this might be totally new to, that are used to more traditional, like dot-centered structure, and really direct, whether it's kids or whether it's people marginalized for a long time. Can you speak to that, and like how do you sort of get buy-in to this style?
You explain it, you present it, you give people a choice. I mean, one of the places I've seen this work most beautifully is in Jabal Nadif in Amman, Jordan. A very, very poor refugee community where women organized there to fight domestic violence using leadership teams. And it created a context and a structure in which women's voices could be heard in leadership roles that were having a very hard time being heard. I mean, it's a question of just explain. People choose. Try it this way. It's not, you know, it's just not that. Yeah, people have very traditional ideas about authority that are often very exclusive and exclusionary. If we're organizing something, we've got to challenge, you've got to deal with. And it turns out that this leadership team structure can be a really useful way to do that. And I don't mean just in traditional communities in other parts of the world. I mean in a lot of different settings. But I was just really struck with the way those teams began to function in that community. It was really, really terrific. And see, everybody then is responsible in that everybody's got this kind of responsibility for a different aspect of leadership. So, yeah.
Mine is kind of a comment and a question. So, when you have such groups who have equal persons, and then if you have an idea as an organizer how to go about having a process to arrive at, say, shared purpose, can you broker side deals, or does it have to be organic?
Wait. Wait, my option is organic or side deal?
No, I mean, to get something going, to get some action going, I can actually broker a side deal with somebody else who can come and speak on my behalf in the group.
You mean, do you use politics?
Yes.
Sometimes. But I mean, I think the general rule is to be as transparent as you can be. I mean, you know, look, groups, there are all kinds of people in groups, and sometimes there's a jerk in a group, and so you have to conspire with some people about how to deal with that. I mean, that's just human nature. That's just, but you try to be transparent, you try to be open, you try to be clear. It's so much better. But that organic, see, I don't know what that means. Intentional, I think, is crucial. You're not just sitting around waiting for stuff to evolve. That's, I mean, why do that? I mean, what you're trying to do is bring your understanding to bear on a circumstance in which you have some things to teach and to share. You also have things to learn. And so you do that. I mean, now you can be premature. You can wait too long. But that's where the judgment comes in. But intentionality, a colleague of mine once did this little 2x2 where she was trying to distinguish intentionality from manipulation. And I think she made this 2x2 that was like, open, like transparent, opaque, intentional, reactive, right? And so intentionality coupled with opacity, that is, you know, hidden manipulation. Intentionality coupled with transparency is intentionality. It's craft, it's purpose. And that's the idea. Be clear, but be intentional. That's the whole point. So we need to move. We need to move. Let me just get a few more things on the table that I can see. One of the issues. To give this life, of course, requires you know, identifying people. It requires one-on-one meetings. It requires getting out there and talking with people and discovering and finding and looking for people who might want to form part of a leadership team of a project. So how would you go about finding them? How would you know one when you see one? I mean, is anybody who will have a one-on-one meeting with you a candidate for my leadership team? Too often it is. I mean, no. But what do you have in mind? How would you go about thinking who might be good for your leadership team, for your project? What are some thoughts on that? Yeah.
Listening to their conversation even in a class like this.
And what are you listening for?
You're listening for something that's right minds. You can feel that they have maybe, and then you have a one-on-one with them to see clarity.
Okay, maybe that. What else are you looking for? Yeah.
Someone with a particular skill that you're looking for, or someone who is a connector, someone who knows a lot of other people.
All right. Maybe, yeah, the relational. So what else are you looking for? Yeah.
Someone who's excited to offer suggestions and ideas about this project.
Yeah. Yeah, Eric?
I'm listening for someone who maybe is a little bit angry in a healthy way.
Describe anger in a healthy way.
That they're frustrated with something that is in front of them or that they see in the world.
So hungry, want to do something, want to make something happen. I think that's really, really important. Yeah.
Maybe in the one-on-one you can ask for could you do something please? And then when you check on the person and if the person does it.
Testing. Good idea. Very good idea. The first Camp Obamas, we just sort of took whoever showed up. Adjustment down the road. Wait a second. Let's have some tests here first. You know, by that I mean testing. Well, testing for what?
Effectiveness and creativity.
What? And I would put at the top of this follow through on commitment. I mean, it's people who actually have a sense of responsibility. You really, really need that. It's really. Now, you know, we can get into like making lists of ideal leaders and so forth. It's not exactly that, but clearly there are dimensions that it's important for a team to be able to work, and people who honor their commitments is pretty important. Now, of course, you design a norm system and so forth. That certainly helps, but it's important. What else? Yeah.
I think like-minded people in the sense that you want to do something differently, but also different-minded people in the sense that you don't just have a group of people that are just like you.
Yeah.
You have someone that if I had a one-to-one with someone and they really challenged my perception of how I thought something should be done or the way we should approach it or why we should do something, I'd almost want them on the team to make it as diverse as possible.
Remember we talked about weak ties and about the importance of diverse perspectives? That's often hard for us, but it's often really important, right? I always pay a lot of attention to curiosity. I sort of respond when people have a lot of questions, trying to understand the world around them. It's something, but like I say, it's not so much personality. It's a combination of the kinds of the kinds of factors that can make for an effective team. You don't get a package where there's sort of the perfect leader or something like that. But clearly, you're looking for people that actually you want to encourage to step up and take responsibility, and that you want to work with. That you want to work with to help shape this thing. So it's important to have that kind of an idea. And then there's this question, yeah.
Is there like an optimal number of the amount of people that would make a good leadership team?
It's a great question. Yeah. Go ahead.
Minimum or a maximum?
It's a great question. I mean, there's all these theories about optimal group size and all this stuff. I don't know, 5 to 7 is pretty good. I mean, when things get too big, it stops being functional in an interactive way. It becomes more of an assembly. And there's a role for that. There's a role for councils. There's a role for mass meetings. There's a role for, but it's sort of finding what the right balance is. I don't think there's a magic number particularly, but I think it's somewhere in that range makes a good team size, where people can actually have enough knowledge of each other and what they're doing, which is not to say you can't have a much bigger group that are involved and engaged. In fact, you want a bigger group. Yeah.
When you have the different roles, are they all then taking leadership in that area? So like you were mentioning data managers and volunteer coordinators, and it's very obvious to me that the volunteer coordinators would go out and be enabling others to act in their values. But is the data manager organizing people for the data management?
It's a great question. The data manager might be the one who's responsible for providing leadership to our team and our organization on data matters. And so like they're focused on the data, they're trying to get the rest of us in line. They may have their own little team that they're working with, but they're also playing a different kind of leadership role with respect to everybody. Does that make sense? Yeah. So it isn't everybody's an organizer, right? Now you want a bunch of people on there who are and who are going to go out, but there are other functions that a leadership team needs. That's a really good question. And so, sometimes people are just wonderful at design. And yeah. Thank you for that question. It's really, really helpful. I don't know about the perfect number. But what I do want to emphasize is development. Because, you can't give leadership to people. At least I've never seen that. Where, I don't know, I've had the experience of being in a town, leaving and say, okay, so-and-so, you're the leaders. You come back, 3 months later and nothing. What was I missing? What was I missing? How do you think I screwed up by doing that? Huh? No coaching and how else? Yeah. They look like good people. You're the leaders here. What was missing?
No clear role.
No clear role? Yeah, I hadn't seen them lead. In other words, it sort of dawned on me that leadership is something that has to be earned. In other words, that it's earned through relationships with other people. It's earned through interaction with other people. And so the real trick to leadership development was creating opportunities in which people could earn leadership. Creating settings in which people could take responsibility for working with other people, for engaging other people, for becoming recognized for their leadership role within the group. So then it shifted to be much more, how do I create opportunities for leadership development rather than how do I go around and appoint every leader? Does this make sense? See, and it could be like little things, like if we're going to pass out leaflets, to come to a rally. I mean, I could get a couple of people and say, a couple of volunteers, would you go stand in Harvard Yard and pass out leaflets for the next 5 days? And I find people do that. Leadership development opportunity? Not so much. I could try to find from each of the undergraduate houses 3 or 4 people, get them to come to a meeting. Tell them we got X number of leaflets we need to get out in order to get X number of people to this meeting. Would you take responsibility for getting 50 people there and you for 50? And by the way, here's the leaflets for you, and let's meet in a couple of days and see how it's going. Leadership development, big time. See, how we organize tasks, and we're going to talk more about this in a week on action, can create opportunities for people to surface and for people to take responsibility and to be coached and supported. Or we can design things so that that doesn't happen. And sometimes it seems more efficient to do it, those two people standing in the yard day after day. The other is more cumbersome, but I'm getting a whole lot more from it. And people are being able to have opportunities to grow and develop. So developing leadership coaching is of course central to that, which is why we introduced it right at the beginning, because that's a way then of working with people to support their development without just telling them what to do. It's a developmental kind of approach, and that's kind of the idea on this leadership development stuff. So we're going to take a look at this video in a few minutes, but let me just pause there. What else is on your mind about this leadership? Recruiting, identifying, developing leadership. How do you know? What are you looking for? Yeah, Mary.
One of the things that seems very important is having the correct conditions, the bounded, the stable, the diverse. How do you create or improve the opportunity to have those conditions when some of it seems like, well, you want to have that there be the shared norms and clear roles that would help create those?
I mean, I think that's how.
So it's not really linear so much as
No.
it's...
No, it's all happening at once. No, I put these more as like, these are sort of conditions you need to create. And, you know, one of the clear ground rules would be, so look, let's decide what it means to be on this leadership team. Are we going to all show up for meetings? Are we not? What's our norm of that? What does it mean to take responsibility here? And, you know, sometimes we're so shy about that. We're afraid that we're going to lose them. You know, they're going to go away. They're going to get scared. Well, then they probably not what you wanted in the first place. But, you know, people aren't that scary. I mean, and in fact, it can come across as something real. This is a serious deal. This is real. This is a real deal here. This isn't a flaky thing. And so, yeah, I got to decide, am I in it or out of it? And if I'm in, you can relax. You know that anxiety you feel when it's uncertain about whether they're really there or not, whether they're really going to be with you or not, whether they really have your back on or not? You know, I think you know what I'm talking about. Well, you don't have to live with that. You know, you can make it transparent, get some choices made, and then you know where you stand and with who. Yeah.
I guess one of the concerns I have is working with people who are your peers and your friends, and being the organizer who's translating this knowledge, this process. You are sort of inserting yourself in the center of the snowflake, and the perceptions that creates. Like, I guess I'm concerned that people may think that even though you are trying to distribute power, you're still sort of kind of helping translate the whole process, and you're still very much at the center of it.
So how are you going to explain it to your friends?
I guess, and make them understand that you're not trying to concentrate power. I mean, if they understand that it will actually snowflake.
Do your friends really think you're power mad?
Hope not.
I hope not too. No, see, again, it's this thing we have about I don't want to appear to be hogging power or other people. People are just not so timid, and you know, it's like, this is what we're doing here. It's what I want to contribute. I don't know. I mean, I take your point. It is one of the tricky dynamics of private and public relationships. You know, you want to have these private relationships over here. You want to operate in a public way, because in a public way, you really need this stuff. In private relationship, I mean, you know, however, whatever. Yeah, 2 points here. Raheli and then Valerie.
I just wanted to ask what the people, how would invite people to this initial meeting, because they're not yet committed. So would you then try to invite a larger number of people who may or may not be committing, and then when you're there and have this conversation, then they can decide whether or not to opt in. But kind of what I'm thinking about is what I'm asking them for coming to that first.
What thoughts do people have about it? This is a great question. How would you handle that? How would you handle it? Really good question. Yeah.
I mean, maybe in the one-on-one, once you've established whether or not you would like them, if you think they would potentially make a good leader, invite them and then let them make the decision on their own. But you make the decision whether or not to invite them if you think they would potentially be a good leader.
I just like follow up, when you're inviting them, what are you inviting them to?
I mean, yeah, right?
I invited the people who I had one-on-ones with to an initial meeting, not to commit for the semester or forever long. I said, come to this
I mean, yeah, if I've got a sense of who I think would be good, yeah, could you come to this meeting with some other people so we can decide what it would take to make this thing happen? And, or, you know, or I might even say, you know, would you consider being on the leadership team? Here's what it entails. We're going to have a meeting with several people who are thinking about the same thing. We can decide there whether we're going to do it or not. Again, transparency. It's really about transparency. It's just not, you don't have to hide the ball. You don't have to hide things. People aren't just going to melt and run away. It's just, it's explaining them in a way that people get the value that it holds for them. That's kind of, I think, the crucial thing. But I understand that, the reaction, or the concern. Very. So, you remember way back, once upon a time, we watched James Croft and, remember that? And Barack Obama, and we talked about public narrative and about translating values into action and urgency and hope, and about the story of self in particular, about a way to communicate something about your values and learn about the values of others. Well, the second piece in that formulation is how to use narrative to surface shared values. In other words, how to bring values that a community, a set of people hold, how to bring them alive, so that those values then become a basis for motivation and for action. And so that's what we call a story of us. And it's not an us in the sense of a category. It's an us in the sense of an experience. That is an experience of usness. Do you remember James Croft and how he brought everybody into that us moment when he was talking about young people who were committing suicide because of bullying, because of sexual preference? Remember that? That was like an us moment. Transcended a lot of different things to create, oh, here's a value we share. And so that's kind of the idea of a story of us, and learning to use narrative to do that. We're going to show an example here of how this works. Narrative always is structured around choices. There's a choice, there's a challenge, it results in an outcome, and that choice moment is what communicates values and where the emotional content is. And there will be a challenge and there will be a source of hope if it's about leadership. This is from the first Camp Obama we ever had in Burbank in July 2007. We were doing this, we were introducing the public narrative training, and we were on the second day of our workshop, and we've just done structure. We just formed leadership teams, and we got to public narrative. We got to Story of Us. And so Susan Christopher came up and did this. Pay attention to the choices that guide this, the values underneath those choices, and then the details that bring those values alive. Yeah.
Well, when I showed up yesterday, I came with a great deal of hesitation. I know that's like speaking heresy to a lot of people here. But I came hesitant, and it was because I was afraid to believe in a candidate again and be disillusioned again. And I was afraid to pick a losing cause again. And I'm a busy person. I'm a mom, I've got a job, we're leaving on family vacation, and I thought, you know what, I'll just show up. I'll show up, I'll see if it's worth my time, and then I can leave. If it's not going anywhere, I can just leave. It's okay. This campaign isn't it for me. And then I sat down, and Marshall started talking, and he started talking about working with Cesar Chavez and marching in Mississippi, and I could feel my heart start beating a little faster. And then I sat down in my group, and men wept who saw Bobby Kennedy shot and felt that loss of hope and a loss of everything that he embodied in that generation. And to have people like Marshall and those men sit there and say that for them, Barack Obama was the return of that hope, I just began to have that hesitation melt away. I felt my heart softening again. I felt myself able to give a little bit more of me to this process. And then we shared our personal stories, and a Catholic and a Muslim and a Protestant and a Jewish man shared their personal stories. And we had just about every race encompassed in those personal stories, all within that faith difference. And I sat there, and in my language, I would say I felt the pleasure of God in this room. I could feel how special and how big what sits in this room was. And I could feel that this campaign is about something really big and really important, and it's the beginning of a healing for our nation and a healing of generations. And the generations that came before that marched with King and people who are just now graduating from high school, we're all working together. We're mentoring each other, and we're moving forward. And I realize it doesn't matter if Barack actually fails me, and it doesn't matter if we win. It does. I'm in it to win it. But this campaign has made us win already.
No more Campbell time. So, patience. Thank you. Okay. Okay, so what were the choices that sort of were the backbone of this very short narrative? Yeah.
She showed up in the first one?
So what was the first choice she had to make?
To go.
Okay, and what was the second choice?
To stay.
To stay. And what was the third choice? Huh? Even before the story, huh? Yeah, to commit. There are actually three. You think she's the only person who traveled that journey? Probably not. She's sort of bridging from herself to an us. And, you know, well, I don't know. Well, I'll stay. Well, I'm with the program. And so she's sort of bridging there to, that's the introduction to, but how do you sense she was creating a sense of usness in there, moments of usness in that group? When, you know, you weren't there, you weren't at, but what's your judgment from what you saw, experienced? How was she trying to do that? What were the elements of it? Yeah.
Talked about how people from different religions were there and talking about their stories.
Yeah. And she's talking about the personal stories. You think her group was the only group that had personal stories told? Every group was doing the same thing. So she's bringing in experiences that people had just even there in that few hours that they've been together, experiences that had a values content to them. Oh, all this diversity, feels good. This is what we're about. What else did you see her do? Yeah.
There was talk about a shared disillusionment and a desire for hope.
I'm sorry,
Shared disillusionment and desire for hope.
But how did she make this stuff real?
She talked about the men talking about Bobby Kennedy being shot. That was one.
So there's a moment.
Men weeping.
Huh?
Men weeping.
So there's moments both. There's a past moment that some people in that room experienced, other people heard about, but a moment that held meaning, held emotional impact. Then again, there's a moment right there where somebody was crying in the group. Probably not the only small group that was happening at. Men that held meaning right then and there. What else did you see her do? How else did you see her bring the sense of usness out? Yeah.
Sharing her fears that were probably shared about being placed, believing something again, and choosing a lost cause again. The words were quite generic, so it didn't necessarily have to be the presidential candidate. It could be any cause or any place, and they let me down.
All right. This fear of being disappointed and let down. Yeah, and I want to say something about the way she ended, but just before we get to that, a few more things about, see, the challenge is you have this very diverse group of people. They were there, they all want to support Obama. That's a commonality. But boy, there was like about every difference possible in there. How did she turn that into a source of strength as opposed to a problem? How did she do that? Different faiths, different generations, different races. Yeah.
She found commonality. She talked about like the pleasure of God's presence.
It's kind of an interesting phrase that she used. Did you notice how she introduced it? Why did she say that? Do you think? Exactly. Acknowledge not everybody would use that terminology. She wanted to respect that, but for her, that was how she was expressing a feeling that she felt in that room. Yeah.
I also thought the way that she said in my language made it seem that it was the first time maybe she'd ever experienced that, or
Nice.
but still like that was the first experience that bring everybody else into as well.
That's nice, like a discovery moment, like a new experience. No, that's very nice. That's a good observation. Yeah. What else? She didn't get up there and say, hey, we're all the same. She didn't do that. She's acknowledging difference all over the place, which is crucial to give any legitimacy and authenticity to what she was doing. But then she's pointing out ways in which there's collaboration and shared values. What about the move at the end there? What was the thing about, I don't care if he wins? Yeah.
The importance of the journey.
Of the
journey.
The journey.
The whole process.
And why emphasize that? Why emphasize that? Yeah.
Is that her story of now, do you think?
It is what's happening right now. Yeah, Arjun?
I was going to say, I think the purpose or the overarching goal was much bigger than just winning this race.
Yeah.
We started that whole mission.
Yeah.
And so whatever happened in the short term, we're still headed towards the right goal.
Yeah, it was a really interesting move that she made to do that. And it really caught everybody. It meant that the value of the whole thing, did it depend on whether Obama won or not? It depended on us, right? What we were doing. The value, you sort of say, where was the challenge here? Where was the hope? The hope was right there in that room. You know, after this, I checked out, there's a whole sort of genre of eve of battle and eve of football game talks. You know, like Any Given Sunday, Al Pacino, or Friday Night Lights, or Henry V, We Happy Few. You know what they all have in common? Not a single one promises victory. Not a single one. They all, it turns out, do what she did, which is they focus on the value being created by the people in that room at that moment, and the action being an expression of that value. And when she was done there, you know, the room stood up and like for 5 minutes, it was just applause, because she had just nailed it. It was really an incredible moment. And one of those moments where you say, thank you, Lord, for sending a videographer. Because this guy was unplanned. He showed up. He had his cameras. He was really good. And he put that together for us afterwards. So sometimes things do work out. Okay, we got a couple of minutes for some takeaways. What are some takeaways from today? Takeaways from today. Yes.
Select your leaders carefully and you take your time with them.
Okay. What else? Yeah. Ooh, I like that one. What else? What else? What takeaways from today? Yeah. Okay. What else? Yeah.
Identify and build off of everyone's unique.
Yeah. Yeah.
Transparency.
Transparency. Yeah. Yeah. A team can also be a dot. We're going to come back to that. It's a very, very important point. And just to connect Susan Christopher back in there, it's very important to pay attention to the celebratory aspect of a team. In other words, of honoring the values that people share. It's not all about the strategy and the tactics and the structure. And you know, this is much more in the spirit of sort of celebrating, honoring, you know, the good we're creating here, the values that are here. Yeah, there was one more back there. That's so important. That's really important. Okay, good. So we'll see you at the workshop. Have a good week.
Do you have the attendance sheet? Can you just make sure it's